Hello and welcome back to DiabloCast, your Diablo 3 podcast. Here we keep you up to date on all things Diablo related and share with you our thoughts and opinions on any recent news and updates. As always, I am your host, Dennis Forrest Duhamel, and with me as always, we of course have Kevin Sixen Carlino.
Of course. What's up, guys?
And we have the special, triumphant return of someone you may or may not know of. I hope you know about him. He is Tyler ScyberDragon Milness, and welcome back, Tyler. How you doing?
Good, guys. Glad to be
Wait, who
back.
is he?
Who is he? No, very happy to have Tyler back. We were able to fit him into this week's recording, and it just so happened that the prior recording in the week, the time that he typically couldn't make, well, it got effed up.
Yeah, so this week's re-recording?
Yeah, this week's re-recording is going to include our buddy ScyberDragon, so very, very happy to have him back on board. Now, in terms of discussion this week, we actually do have a few things to talk about. We're going to be going into some detail about item progression. I know a lot of people have a little bit of confusion about how item progression will work in Diablo 3. We're also going to be making a little bit of discussion about the monk, specifically talking about the spirit, the combo points, and auras, or the buffs for the monk. And then lastly, we'll be bringing up the player collision in Diablo 3. So with that said, let's just go ahead and jump right into our first topic, which is going to be item progression in the game. Alright, so we now know, or we have known for a while, but we've recently got some kind of reconfirmation about the 18 tiers of gear. And it is very, very important that people understand specifically what this means, because there has been so much confusion and so many questions as to what the tiers are, what the implication behind the tiers, how they're going to be paced out, if it's, stats, or if does it have anything to do with the rarity of the item. Just so many questions have been asked recently, so I figured we should spend some time talking about this. So the first important note is going to be these tiers are visual. These are 18 visual tiers that will be paced throughout the game. We don't know the exact pacing yet, but it's going to be obviously averaging, since there are 3 difficulties, about 6 tiers per difficulty. So there may be 5 in the first one. Or what? Do you remember what the specific quote that Bashak said?
Yeah, I mean, he was just giving an example. He said they weren't exactly sure what the deal was, but as an example, he used 1 through 5 in normal, 6 through 10 in nightmare, and then 10 through 18, or 11 through 18, sorry, in hell.
Yeah, so I mean that's an example. It could be paced differently. I do feel like hell could very possibly have more tiers than the first 2 difficulties, but again, there's really no way to know. But the important thing about this entire discussion about these tiers is to realize, as I just said, that they are visual, and that is it. There can be different rarities amongst all of the tiers. So let's say, for argument's sake, let's try to make this nice and simple. Let's say normal has 4 tiers of gear within it. So that will probably likely be about 1 tier per act. Well, that means that there is 1 visual tier for Act 1, and that's it. So if a helm drops, it will have a specific visual. And the other specific thing that's really important to realize too is that these are also separated amongst all the classes. So a tier 1 helm on a barbarian looks completely different than a tier 1 helm looks on a witch doctor. But on top of that, there's a segregation for rarity of the items. So that means a tier 1 helm can be normal, magical, or rare. It has the possibility. So I mean, this is actually, I think, a lot bigger than people are realizing.
Also, keep in mind that they're distinct between genders as well.
Yeah,
not just between classes.
Yeah, exactly. And then on top of that, we can dye these pieces. So there's a lot of customization, and there's going to be a lot of gear in the game. But I think one big confusion is that people were thinking, when they heard 18 tiers of gear, that there were just going to be 18 helms and 18 chest pieces and 18 legs, pants, whatever you want to call them. But that's not the case. So, now that we've kind of gotten some further clarification, how are your feelings, Tyler, on how the gear system, the tier system, if you will, is going to be looking in Diablo 3?
I think the biggest difference between that and Diablo 2 is Diablo 2 we were used to getting, what was there, 7 or 8 unique looks to the armors, and we were used to getting them all through our normal run through the game. And now we have 18, which is, probably 2 to 3 times as many pieces of gear look-wise that we can get, but they're just spread out throughout the entire game of normal, nightmare, and hell. So I think through normal, you probably won't be seeing as much variation as we're used to in Diablo 2, but assuming people are going to play past normal is when you're going to see a lot more variation in your character getting that much better. Because I hated playing Diablo 2, and you finish normal, and you get into nightmare, and the upgrade to your armor is now a leather cap, and you had to go back to that look.
Oh, I know, right?
And you're like, really? So
Yeah.
I definitely think it's going to look a lot cooler once you get higher level characters. I think normal is going to suffer a little bit in that, and that's why I'm actually hoping that the actual I guess, sets of each one. There actually is more in normal than Nightmare and Hell, just to get you, going through that first initial phase, especially, because they're doing a lot of stuff where they expect people to only play through normal. I mean, look at the follower system and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe the first, 8 sets are available through normal, just to get you that really quick progression as you're starting your character, and then as you progress further, they get more and more sparse, and you actually really appreciate once you get that, to that next level of tier for that armor.
That's pretty interesting, and actually something that I do think, you specifically just mentioning the fact that we've known that they expect statistically that the vast majority of people who purchase the game will probably only play through normal, but something that I really like that the way that they're pacing this tier, this item progression in the game, is that you won't see all of the gear now in your playthrough of normal, at least the visual. You won't see all of the visual upgrades in your playthrough of normal. So that is another incentive for people to continue into Nightmare and Hell, because again, you played through normal, visually you saw all there was to see in Diablo 2. But in Diablo 3, that's not going to be the case. There will be tiers, likely 6 and above, 6 through 18, let's say, in Nightmare and Hell remaining, and as a player, that may give people who wouldn't otherwise have played past normal, that might give them incentive to do so. So that's definitely pretty interesting. But something else to mention too, that on top of this, again, once more, the 18 tiers are visual. The rarity has no indication amongst the tiers. So a tier 1 helm, like I said, can drop, and it can be normal, it can be magical, it can be rare. And then on all of these pieces, on all of these rarities, the stats are going to be randomized on top of that. So there's a lot of gear that is going to be in the game. But then we have the ever exclusive legendary items, which it's looking that it could quite possibly they could have their own visual status. Do we have any information on that, Kevin, in terms of the visuals? I know that something had been discussed quite some time ago about this, but
yeah, just recently somebody had brought this up in the forums, and I mean, I recall reading Bashiok confirm that legendaries weren't going to be part of the 18 tiers. I mean, I feel like it's been some time now, but after I went back over the thread, one of the other forum regulars also mentioned the same thing that I remembered reading. So I mean, I'm not crazy. So yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I believe the legendaries will not be part of the 18 tiers. Now, what this means is that legendaries will have their own unique visuals for the most part. I mean, yeah, I guess some legendaries may look like other items and whatnot, maybe recolored or something just a little bit different. But for the most part, legendaries should have their own visual.
Yeah, and I mean, there you go. So that's even more. Now, numbers-wise, what are we looking at in terms of the separate gear? Well, a specific quote from Bashiok, I believe it was either on Friday or Saturday that he wrote this, somewhere in the forums. He mentions, okay, we have the 18 tiers. You multiply that by 5 for each of the classes, and then I guess you could even do that once more for the sexes. But for argument's sake, 18 tiers times the 5 classes, because each class, remember, for each tier, each class has a separate visual. And then you multiply that times the 8 armor slots, and that leaves us with 720 unique pieces of armor visually. 720 visual unique pieces of armor. And then again, we have dyes.
That's not even counting the weapons that you can potentially have either.
Yeah, exactly. So there's the weapons, we have the dyes as well to alter the way our armor looks, and then quite possibly the legendary items. So there's a lot, and I think this is exciting, and hopefully maybe our discussion of this has clarified a little bit how you guys feel personally as viewers and people looking forward to Diablo 3 about the armor set. But needless to say, there's going to be a crap ton of gear, and visually I'm really looking forward to see. I mean, man, I can't even just on one character having 18 different tiers. I think that's nuts. It's going to be awesome to see that our characters progress from normal all the way through the end of hell. And I don't know how difficult it's going to be, but here's hoping that we eventually get full sets of 18.
Yeah, I know. And I mean, like, as soon as I get in the game, I'll be like, wow, my character looks sick. And then like I'll get the next 2-3 tiers. I'll be like, wow, that looks sick. And then I mean, like, how much sicker could it possibly get over 18?
Yeah. And and actually, as stupid as it sounds, aesthetically, I'm really excited for dyes, because I'm really excited to see kind of how these things could end up looking. Because I know a big complaint for players in kind of any RPG game is, oh, I like this gear, it looks cool, but who picked the freaking color scheme? This looks like crap, you know? So being able to have that level of customization is something I actually never expected from a Diablo franchise, but when they announced that, I thought that was pretty neat, so that's something else I'm looking forward to. And then one last thing, people questioning, am I going to be kind of blending in with everyone else that I play with? Is everyone else on Battle.net going to look the same as me because, we've got these tiered gear? A piece of gear drops, it doesn't mean you have the entire set. That's something else that's important to realize. You're going to be mixing between the tiers visually. You also, of course, having the crafted gear mixed up, you may get a legendary or two, so people will look different. And then once more, the dies. So there's really no need to be concerned about that. I guess the only real concern will come the late end game, where I would have to assume ideally people would be wearing pretty much all level 18 tier gear, and then maybe throwing in some legendaries and possibly some high-end crafted gear as well. And then there's some sense of uniformity at that point in the game, but even then, the dies. So you got any thoughts on that, Tyler?
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna disagree with you. And going based off of kind of what I said earlier, I actually think it's the beginning of the game where people are gonna look more uniform because there's so few tiers to mess around with. Towards the end game, yeah, everybody wants, tier 18, and I'm sure that has the best stats, but at the same time, that's, kind of end game goal. So really, I feel at the end game, there's going to be people juggling around with 15, 16, 17, 18, and kind of mixing those all together. Same way, I mean, if you played Diablo 2, obviously, when you finish the game the first time, or, even after playing for a while, you didn't have all of the highest set of gear. You slowly worked on that, and that's actually where I think we'll see the most variation is from everybody, whatever gear's possible for them to get at that time, and whatever's best at that time for them is what they're wearing. So I think, ideally 10 years from now when everyone's wearing the top gear, which is kind of weird to say that we can, speculate on a game that's going to be around for 10 years. But I think easily within the next 3 or 4 years, even with expansions and coming out with, higher level sets and stuff like that, that we're not going to see that uniformity that I think so many people are worried about.
And that is something that's really important to note. People who may be new to the Diablo franchise, you don't just get to the end game and you're decked out in the end game gear, and then you can just say, oh, well, why don't you just farm the boss for the gear? That's not Diablo. Diablo doesn't work like that. It's random. Your drops are random. You don't know. You can't farm one specific boss really for this one specific piece of gear. It doesn't really work like that. So that's something else that's important to realize. And then the difficulty, as you mentioned, people very, very likely for a while will be sitting on tiers 14, 15, 16, 17, and then just a couple of 18 pieces, and it's going to take a while. And just say, let's pretend that you play for a day, and you get 2 tier 18 pieces to drop for you. Who's to say the stats have freaking anything to do with your character?
Right,
you know what I mean?
Exactly what I was about to say. I mean, who's to say that 14 doesn't have better stats than 15? I mean, yeah, 15 might look different, might look cooler, but what if the tier 14 item is better than the tier 15 item?
Yeah, and well, I mean, I think it's I think stats wise that it's going to be ever increasing in terms of stats allocation. But for your specific character, you're correct.
Okay, if there's 8 different tiers in Hell, obviously we're gonna have to find more than one tier per act. So what if you find tier 14 and 16 in Act 1, and you get a legendary tier 14 item and a magical tier 16 item?
Yeah,
tier 16 is gonna look cooler, but the 14 is gonna be better.
And even basing this off of Diablo 2, I know I have characters that I play through, and I have nightmare level stuff on them at end game through Hell because that was the best stats I found. If I find +2 to druid skills on a weapon on my druid, even though I got it in nightmare, that's probably the weapon I'm going to carry throughout all of Hell. Even though there's stuff with better base attacks and stuff like that, it all depends on the stats that are on it. That depends really whether or not you equip it.
And you know what? That's something else. I'll just say it one more time because I know a lot of people had so much confusion about this. But like Kevin and Tyler were just speaking about, okay, we're in Hell and you're wearing a tier 15 headpiece, and let's say it's rare, so it has more base stats than a normal or magical item does. But then maybe a tier 17 headpiece drops, but it's normal or magical. Well, it's not going to have as as Kevin just said, it's not going to have as many stats, and it may not be as good for you as the rare tier 14 helm. So there you have it. I mean, people just have to realize that in terms of gear and the random loot table, it is massive in Diablo 3, and it'll just take a while. It'll take a long time before you ever reach that position. So yeah, that's something that's really important to realize. And I think the biggest confusion for people was the fact that when they heard 18 tiers, they weren't considering rarities, and they thought that, you know, each tier had these base stats, whatever, and if you found a tier upgrade, that it was going to be an upgrade. But that's, as we just talked about, that's not necessarily going to be the case. So yeah, hopefully we clarified that for you guys. Hopefully that makes kind of naysayers a little bit more understanding of how it's going to work, and maybe a little bit more excited about it as well. So I'm pretty sure that just about does it for the item progression and the tier discussion, and we will be moving right on to... do we have something else, Kevin?
Yeah, we do. How did you know? I didn't even...
I heard a little... I heard your mic turn on, so...
Yes, sir.
So bring it up.
The Salvage cube, I just thought we should mention it again.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'll let you do it then. Go ahead.
Right. So just recently in that same thread about item progression and stuff, Bashiok was talking about the Salvage cube and basically said that it's not actually called the Salvage cube. Yeah, the name has a cube in it, but the name is a spoiler, so he wasn't going to give it to us. However, I remembered that Jay Wilson had told us that it was called the Nephilim cube at last BlizzCon in a backstage, behind-the-scenes press Q&A kind of thing that we reported on. So I went ahead and posted that up, and Bashiok confirmed that yes, it's called the Nephilim cube. Now, I mean, I guess he already said that this was a spoiler, so this has the Nephilim obviously. Well, I mean, obviously the Nephilim are going to be in the storyline because I mean they're just humans, but maybe this has more to do with the story than we might think.
Yeah, I mean, anything we would talk about would be pure speculation, obviously. But, I mean, the odds are the fact that he mentioned that it was a spoiler and the fact that we know it's called the Nephilim Cube means the Nephilim probably will have some large role within the game. So we'll be interested to see how that takes place, what it is. That's something, of course, that we don't expect to be revealed in the beta because obviously we're assuming that they're going to be pulling most of that type of stuff out of the game when we do practice a beta. So we'll just have to wait until the release to get some more information on about that. But, I mean, there we go. And, you know, something else that brings up kind of the excitement of all the possibilities, you know, are we going to end up fighting in heaven at some point? Will we eventually fight angels? This is something we've talked about in the past before as well, so... definitely lots of stuff to look forward to. But I guess that finally does it for our discussion about item progression and the cube. And let's go into some discussion about the monk. All right, so Monk's resource system is Spirit. We have known this for a while now. But in terms of how Spirit works specifically, there were some questions. People were wondering, does it kind of work like Rage does? Does it work, you know, does it work like a Fury system? What's the whole deal behind it? Well, in terms of how it's going to function, it will function along the lines of your your monk will be punching and kicking and using these base abilities that build the Spirit, and then the Spirit actually stays static. It does not regenerate, nor does it degenerate. It will stay at whatever position you have it at, and then you use it through kind of specialty monk abilities, and at that point you'll lose it. So something that we were actually discussing in the prior recording of the podcast, Tempest was with us in the prior recording. Obviously we don't have that information for you, so we'll just talk about it here now, is the idea of preloading your Spirit before a big engagement and then dumping it. So the obviously the theory behind this is the abilities that cost Spirit are going to probably be more powerful. So if we can preload and then dump it all on a boss, or even possibly in a PvP scenario, this will provide us a lot of upfront damage. So as an example, we'll say we know we're about to encounter a boss fight. This is our second playthrough through the game, and we know that a boss is right around the corner. So as the monk, I'll just use my normal attacks to build up all my Spirit on some skeletons and crap, and then as soon as the boss comes out, I'm just going to unload on him and do a crap ton of massive upfront damage. So this is a cool mechanic. It's something that I'm looking forward to. Tyler, Kevin, have either of you thought about playing the monk, or what do you think about kind of the way that Spirit's going to function as it was mentioned by Bashiok?
I was thinking about it. I mean, I'm more of a caster, mage, wizard kind of a thing. So I mean, if anything, the monk would be my worst enemy. So I guess in that sense, kind of sucks that it doesn't degenerate. but But I mean, if I were ever to play the monk, I mean, I guess it's pretty cool because he's kind of similar to the rogue, just without the whole stealth aspect. It's probably cool. I mean, obviously you're gonna have to use a little bit of strategy in there. I mean, you're gonna want to go after the smaller, easier monsters first to make sure you take them out, so the way you can build up your spirit and then dump out the stuff on the bigger guys. I mean, as we know, the AI and monsters are supposed to be a little bit smarter, so if they send the grunts at us first, we take them out normally and then dump out the bigger, more powerful spells on the big guys.
And how about you, Tyler? Do you have any thoughts on the monk spirit system, how it functions, anything like that?
I'm not gonna lie, the monk is actually growing on me. The more and more I learn about the monk, the more interesting he seems as a class to play. I think when I first heard about him, I didn't really care too much, but as time's progressed and we've learned more about this class, I find him more interesting. I think the thing that I find the most interesting about his spirit and how his attacks are working is his combo moves won't require a resource, essentially. So, I mean, I guess it's kind of how it plays into the rest of the classes as well, is that we're basically going to have skills to constantly be spamming. Like, auto attack is pretty much non-existent, especially, for the monk. If you can use your combo skills instead of auto attacking, why would you ever auto attack? So I think that is part of it that I find interesting, is that he has, a couple skills actually that won't require any resource, and you'll be able to use those. I think the other thing that's interesting about him and how that's playing out between the combos and the finishing moves, or whatever they're calling them, that uses the spirit, is the fact that Blizzard themselves has said that the monk has the most damage output potential of any of the classes. Granted, it takes you to master that class in order to do that. And I think that's another thing that I find interesting about the monk, is that learning how to play that character and balancing those skills and, the combo attacks versus spirit moves and stuff like that, and finding the best way to optimize him as a character is really interesting as well.
Yeah. And obviously, as you mentioned, the most damage output, people will cry foul, and they'll say, well, what about the wizard? What about the witch doctor? Well, you have to, of course, realize that the monk is a melee class, so you have to be within range. And a lot of the skill, besides learning the combo point system and learning how to maintain your spirit, or a lot of the skill will come from, being able to stay within range of your target. That's a really big thing. And that's something else specifically that I just do want to touch on very quickly. This will be a PvP moment. I'll keep it brief for all you PvP haters. But, looking at this system, it works a lot like the way the Barbarian one does. The only big difference, the Barbarian doesn't have the combo point system, but the idea that we're building up this resource and then dumping it on larger attacks, that's how the Barbarian functions exclusively. So what's the big difference? Well, the fact that the spirit doesn't degenerate is huge, because a huge tactic for players, of course, overall as a range, we're always going to want to keep melee units, melee characters away from us. Always. If they're not in range, they can't do damage. Great. So when you're kiting around, when you're using slows and snares to keep the Barbarian away from you, when you're kiting around the Barbarian, his resource is depleting. So the longer you kite him, the less resource he has to dump out his special attacks on you. You can't really do that with the monk, because you can kite him all day, but if he has any spirit built up, it is staying there, and the second he gets within range, he will unload them on you and smash your face in. And that's going to be the plan, and that's the idea. So it's pretty interesting. It adds an interesting dynamic. I definitely feel from everything we've seen overall that the monk is the most anti-caster of the two melee, the monk and the barbarian. The barbarian seems to be much more anti-melee, so it is quite possible that the barbarian will do well against the monk. But with the fact that kiting around does nothing to the monk, with the fact that monk has this freaking ridiculous spell that bounces spells back. Have you guys seen that? That is the most absurd thing I've ever seen. He twirls around his baton or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And it reflects spells back. That is absurd, and I cannot wait to see that in use.
That's pretty sick, though.
So yeah, it definitely seems that overall the monk is going to be the most anti-caster focused. Kiting won't do so much. Obviously, when you kite the monk, it won't do damage, but he won't be depleting his resource. His spirit will not deplete, so be careful when he gets up close. But it's pretty interesting. Overall, I think I definitely like it, and I like how they made with something that seems very similar to what the Barbarian uses. By doing something simple like making it not degenerate, they completely changed up kind of the tactics and how the class will function. And obviously, again, the monk has this combo point system. But I think it's pretty much it. Do either of you have anything else to mention about the monk spirit system?
No.
No?
Crickets.
Okay. All right, crickets it is. So up next, we will talk about auras with a monk. It was mentioned, it was in the past the case that it was looking that monks' auras were going to be permanent. That's how kind of people thought of them, kind of like the paladin functioned in Diablo II. But as it turns out, that's not the case. Kevin, you want to kind of fill people in on how it's going to work for the monk?
Right. So essentially, auras, like you just said, are no longer, or I guess we don't really know if they were originally permanent, but
people
they are going to be permanent.
They were, at least, so.
Right. So they're more similar to the barbarians' buffs and shouts from Diablo II than they are the paladins' auras. So essentially, you want to look at them as a shout. You know how Diablo II basically you buffed yourself. You gave battle command, battle order, and whatever the third one is that nobody really ever bothered using. And then essentially it just lasts for a certain amount of time. Whether that can get annoying or not is debatable because, I mean, yeah, essentially it'll get annoying having to make sure I'm rebuffed and whatnot. And I believe last time we talked about this, Dylan said, well, it's supposed to be something like you use it before all the battles. And, it's supposed to be like you're only going to have it on part of the time. And my defense for that was, well, I mean, if I can be stronger, why wouldn't I always want to be stronger? So essentially, if you have an aura, you're always going to want to keep yourself buffed. They don't really have any time frame on how long it is or what the duration is, but essentially you're going to have to rebuff every so often. This isn't permanent.
Yeah, I think the major concept behind this system with these temporary buffs is that just everything will be very situational, and you'll actually you'll want to not always have the same one on. You'll want to kind of be able to bounce back and forth. Something else that's interesting as well is having this second class besides the barbarian who's got these short duration character party buffs. It seems reasonable to assume that they will be stackable. So we'll have be having a monk and a barbarian in your party for overall group buffs would seem like an overall good idea. Try to make sure that there's some sort of synergy between it. But I would have to assume, I couldn't imagine that they would make it so that they weren't stackable. So yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. Do you have any thoughts on the way the ore system is going to work, Tyler? Any opinions on that?
I mean, I guess that's with the time duration. I think it's just the better of the two options. There was just so many problems with auras in Diablo 2, and translating that into Diablo 3 was always my question on what they were going to do with auras. I mean, even just having it equipped on one of your skill hot bars alone, because with Diablo 2 you only had the two choices of left click, right click.
Yeah.
And with Diablo 3 now, you have those plus the hotbars. So it was, are you still going to have to keep one of those on one of your clicks to keep it active? Are you going to be able to, switch out between the two? So I think it's really, the biggest thing is just that it just ended up being the best and easiest way to use them without causing more troubles with other things as well.
Mm-hmm. All right, so next on the discussion board, staying on the topic of the monk, will be the combo point system. As we have been talking about, we did mention the combo points in our initial discussion of the monk, but essentially, it'll work like you think it will. You build up combo points, and then you use, I believe, what's called toppers or like finishing moves, something like. Do we have a specific name for what they're called?
Yeah, well, I mean, Bashek was calling them toppers, so I don't really know if that's just what he was calling it, or I mean, if that's what they call it internally, or. So, finishing move is essentially the big shebang. The big shebang.
So we build up combo points with our base attacks, which also, as it turns out, builds up our spirit. But we build up combo points with our base attacks, and then we use these toppers. We can refer to them as that. So obviously, based on whatever level you are, there's looks like 3 levels is what we're looking at. Based on whatever level you're at, the topper will likely do more damage, have a stronger effect, larger area, something along those lines.
Look cooler.
Yeah, exactly. No, it'll look cooler. But people were concerned as to tracking this system. Are we going to have some sort of visual indicator as to what's going on in game? And why don't you let everyone know, Kevin, what the answer to that is?
Unfortunately, the answer is going to be no. Essentially, what they had said was that they don't want combo points to be so important that you have to make sure you're paying attention to it in the game. However, they did say that to be, a better monk player, this is something that you'd want to keep track of in your head. So, it's not completely necessary, but those players that want to do better as the monk, so I guess in PvP it's really going to make a big difference. you're going to need to keep track of how many points you currently have and what you want to spend them on, because they do different things based on how many points you have. And obviously, like Dennis was just saying, the bigger, cooler, better, stronger is going to be the very last, the topper, whatever you want to call it.
So basically what Blizzard said was Scrubs GTFO counted today, basically.
Well, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying about the monk earlier, in that, anybody can play the monk and spam their way through it, and I'm sure beat the game. But you also have these advantages to, for skilled players to take these small little things and use them to their advantage and make the character even better.
Yeah, and I think something else important to realize too, something that was brought up is people there are toppers that do things like let's say sprint you forward a certain distance, and the initial thought was that only the third level of whatever topper you're using, if your combo point and you hit 1, 2, 3, well, only if you were at the third level of that combo point stage that the topper would actually have that special effect. But what Bashiok cleared up for us was the fact that no matter what level of the combo point system you are in, the special addition of the topper, let's say it sprints you forward, will always be there if you're at level 1, 2, or 3. So it doesn't really matter. It's just that only at the third level you'll be doing the maximum effect. So that's something else. So even that, though, I guess that's a little more noob friendly, if you will, because you will still have that special effect no matter what. You won't have to ever worry about missing it, because that could be something that's freaking awful. If you can only imagine that you're on level 2 in the combo points, you go 1, 2, and then you use a topper that you're expecting to kind of move you from point A to point B because you're trying to avoid damage, but it doesn't happen, and you get one shot or something. So.
Yeah, right. That's why I'm disappointed about the lack of visual indication of this. Because, I might think that something gives me a combo point, and I might not actually get it. I might miss or something at it,
I think I was upset when I heard that there was no visual cue for the combo system at first. Especially for people who are used to playing the assassin, there was that system there. But we're also talking about, at most, as far as we know, 3 clicks.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're tracking, up to 10 levels, or, you're possibly holding on to these 3 and then, doing 10 other attacks in between before you do another one. With Diablo, you're clicking 100 times a minute, so these 3 clicks are really going to add up quickly anyway. So even if they had a visual cue, I don't know what it'd be, because it'd have to be so quick and so easy to translate that you would be able to see it within, a second or 2 before you used a different move.
Yeah, I guess that is something that's pretty big as well, because Diablo is such a spamming game. All the attacks are instant. You're click, 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 click. You need like a new mouse every 6 months. So that is the case. You'll definitely be burning through these 3 stages, and I would have to imagine that almost 99% of the time you're either getting stage 2 or stage 3. Like it doesn't seem like it could really happen any other way. It's just the way that Diablo is played in general. So yeah. As it turns out, right now, currently, again, we're looking at no visual cues or indications as to what level of the combo point system that we are on, and you'll have to do it for yourself. But luckily, the toppers will have the same effect no matter what level you are on. It just won't be as strong as an effect if you're not on the third level. All right, so let's go ahead now, and we will move into discussion of player collision in the game. And basically, long and the short is, there is no player collision at all. It was decided that this is not going to be incorporated within the game. You cannot bump or move or block other players in the co-op or in the PvP system, in the PvP games. And the only thing that will have collision is you against demons, you against the computer, basically. So you can be blocked off by AI, by demons, by monsters within the game, but you cannot block off other players. So I guess we'll start with you, Tyler. What are your thoughts about this? I know player collision is a big topic of debate amongst games, RPGs in particular. How do you feel about their removal of it in Diablo 3?
I'm just glad now, because they can have another maggot layer without it being a pain in the ass.
Oh my god, that was so disgusting. I hated that.
No, I'm glad, and the topic actually came up as a response from Bashiok to someone talking about griefing and using it, purposely casting zombie walls around your friends with a group of, unique monsters so that they die easily or something like that.
As terrible as that is, that's pretty funny.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the sad thing is, it would probably be me that ends up dying.
I'm glad that that's not a possibility. So if I'm in some pug group and someone decides to just be a jerk for whatever reason and wants to do that's not really an option. But I think for a game as fast-paced as Diablo, it just doesn't work anyway. You really have to be able to move around quickly, and you're constantly moving anyway. So I'm glad that there's really no player collision or anything like that.
Yeah, something that people will say is, well, that adds to the strategy or the tactics of the game. If there's player collision, it forces you to be more aware of your surroundings. But as much as that may be the case, I think more than anything, it was used for griefing purposes, and it's obvious by the fact that there's no hostile in the co-op gameplay and the inclusion of the arena system as the only form of PvP in the game, that anything that really prones itself to being griefing focused, Blizzard is happy to remove. So, and how about you, Kevin? What are your thoughts on it, just in general as well?
Yeah, I'm also pretty happy about this because, like Tyler was saying, the maggot lair. There are times in Diablo 2 where, like me and my party, we would run into a room, and of course I would be leading the group, and I would just be overwhelmed, and I would say, okay, everybody turn around and run, and then nobody would move, so I'd be dead.
Yeah.
So now that there's no player collision, I could just turn around and run, and they can die. If they're not paying attention, that ain't my fault.
Yeah, it's too funny. But that's just the case. You run into stuff like that, and again, people say, well, maybe your party members should be better, but no, it was used for griefing more than anything.
I think my party members should be better. Hell yeah. Get the hell out of my way so I don't die.
If there's anybody who wants collision on just for the strategy, then I say turn on friendly fire too, and tell me how fun that game is.
Oh god, man. Could you imagine friendly fire in Diablo? That would be the most
friendly
ridiculous
fire in
thing.
Diablo 1.
You know what they should do? They should just enable friendly fire default on hardcore in Diablo.
There you go.
I think that should be. I mean, if you really want to call yourself hardcore, then stay out of Disintegrate, stay out of any AOE, because
there you go.
It's
Meteor and boom, your whole party's dead.
Yeah, I mean, I guess personally, overall, I would say I'm pretty happy with the change. It will be interesting in PvP, especially with the new inclusion of having a lot of there's going to be lots of line of sight things going on, just like there is in the WoW arena. People trying to stay out of the way of range damage. So having no player collision while running around pillars can add an interesting dynamic. So
especially if we're fighting two barbarians and I run behind a pillar, all I have to do is come in from both sides and trap me in there, and then I'm dead if there's player collision. There's no way.
So what's the problem? I don't see.
yeah, right. Obviously, a wizard could just teleport. Actually, I don't know if you can teleport through people if there would be player collision. So and
that's part of the thing. All those things would be lots of issues that would arise, and it's just, I don't know. Blizzard just decided not to include it, so quit your crying. It's not in the game. There you go. So that's how it is.
I'm still excited though that I can create a nice little corral zombie wall in PvP.
Yeah, yeah. Man, it's just in the PvE system. That'll be cool though. That'll be pretty fun. Although I wonder if they stay persistent. I feel like maybe if you cast a second zombie wall, maybe the first one would disappear. I don't know.
That's right, because I'll have 3 witch doctors in my group, and all 3 of us will just create a process around the other team.
Man. There you go.
Alrighty, so that pretty much does it for major topics for the week, but let's go ahead and go straight now into the poll of the week. Alright, so first we're going to wrap up last week's poll, then we will go ahead and go into this week's poll. So Kevin, why don't you go ahead and wrap up the poll from last week?
So, wrap up the poll. All right, let's wrap it up. So last week we wanted to know what you wanted the most in the collector's edition, and it seems like everybody, well, the majority of you voted for in-game exclusives. So to be frank, StarCraft 2 was the decals and stuff like that. World of Warcraft are these cool little pet things. So obviously they're going to have something in Diablo 3, so I guess we'll have to see what that is. And close behind was the extra merchandise, so stuff like, extra stuff that isn't the art book and the behind-the-scenes DVD and soundtrack. So just other cool little stuff, like, the USB thing where in StarCraft 2 they had a Jim Raynor USB dog tag kind of a thing. It was pretty cool. So, just little merchandise. And then coming in last was that you do not plan on... Actually, no, that wasn't even last. Wow. You don't plan on getting the collector's edition. That's great.
Well, it is expensive. I know a lot of people don't really get it, so...
Yeah, it'll probably be for something around $100. And that's the StarCraft 2 one was, but I don't mind spending the extra $30 for dozens and dozens of stuff. So if you consider yourself a hardcore Diablo fan, then you better get it. Otherwise, you can't get the website.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so that was last week's poll, and Tyler, why don't you let everyone know about this week's poll?
Yeah,
all right. Would you like me to talk about your poll or my poll?
We're putting you to work since you're
gonna wrap up my poll. All right, go ahead.
All right.
It's either.
So this week's poll, our question to you guys is: how do you choose which class to play first? Essentially, your first class, you don't have any game experience. No one's played any of these characters yet. So how do you decide which class it is that you do want to play first? Some of our options are going to be looks. I know, Diablo 3's got these 18 sets of gear, and each character actually has their own unique looks to each of these gears. So looks are really going to play a big role in to each of these classes and how they play out. Archetype, a lot of people just choose, I'm always the big hitting melee player, so I'm always going to be the barbarian. Next after that is going to be playstyle, which is similar to archetype, but slightly different, mainly because, maybe you're a ranged character, but you don't like, being magic. You want to be the ranged melee with the demon hunter, or you like melee, but you don't want to be the big brute, so you want to be the quick monk. So, there's those slight variations to the archetypes that will, possibly determine which class you play. There's also, the skills and traits for each class. We have quite a bit of information on a lot of the skills and traits for most of the classes, and maybe there was a class you didn't think was going to be too interesting, but as you learned their skills and really thought about, how that character was going to play out, it kind of changed your mind, and that's the class you want to play on. Another one is lore. There's some big lore junkies out there. Some people don't want to play certain classes because of the lore. They want to choose ones because of the lore. Another choice is going to be your friends. A lot of people, if you don't know which class you really want to play, maybe your friends have 4 of the 5 classes determined already, so you play that 5th one. And the last one, as always, is other. Maybe there's something in there that we didn't think about and that you use to decide.
All right, so there you go. And you can just go ahead and head on over to DiabloFans.com, sign into your account, and you'll be able to vote for this week's poll. And yeah, that about does that. So let's just go ahead and finish things off, as always, with some user questions. And I am actually just going to pull a bunch of random questions. If you guys have any questions on your end that you want to ask, we can get to that as well. But let me just take a couple here from the Facebook page. Let's see, which question did I want to look at first? Here's a good one. This first question comes from Daniel. Daniel asks, do you think that there should be the same legendary item, or legendary or unique, he says, item for each weapon? Like in WoW, the Vicious Gladiator's Bone Grinder Mace is the same as the Vicious Gladiator's Decapitator Axe. And then he says it would be cool if 2 barbs have the same legendary item, but one with a axe and one with a mace. Okay, so essentially what he's asking is if there will be different item types, like axes and maces and swords, but having the exact same stats. That's not really Diablo. I don't feel like that's really Diablo. I don't know how you guys feel, but that doesn't seem like something that will likely happen. So...
No, definitely not. I'm just gonna go out on a limb right here.
Tyler's disgusted. You can hear it in his voice.
Say that'll not be the case. I mean, it just kind of defeats the whole purpose, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, we have to be honest here. There are going to be a lot of people who play Diablo 3 who have no prior Diablo experience. And I remember people going as far as saying you should be forced to have a copy of Diablo 2 in order to buy Diablo 3. You bring like your proof of purchase to the store. If you don't have Diablo 2, then you can't get the 3rd game. But let's not be silly. Come on. A lot of people were turned on to Blizzard games by WoW. That's just a fact, because WoW's huge. And as such, a lot of people are likely to play Diablo. So yeah, that's not a Diablo thing. Back to your question, that's not kind of a Diablo thing. That's more of an MMO WoW focused thing. Diablo is much more randomized, and that kind of thing pretty much just won't be taking place. All right, so next question here. Christian asks, hello Force, with regard to runestones, visual effects on skills, do you know if the visual effects will change with the level of the rune too? This is actually something we talked about in the past, and I don't know that if we have 100% clarification, but I'm going to say I'm 99.9% sure that will be the case. Your guys' thoughts? Nothing?
Nothing.
I mean, it seems like that would be the case, that as the levels of the runes increase, that the visuals wouldn't maybe change, but maybe
would hope so.
The area of effect would grow larger, or some things would be more intensified.
Well, I mean, I guess the only direct examples that we have to see from that they showed us was, for example, what's it, Arcane Orb or Magic Missile or something like that. If you have the multi-shot on there, obviously you're shooting out 2. The next one you're shooting out, by the end you're shooting out 18 missiles at once. So I'm sure, going beyond just multi-strike, I'm sure it's going to look bigger and better. So there's at least that visual cue for people, who are looking at your character playing, know exactly, what rune you have in there and what level that rune is. And let's face it, I mean, the whole point of leveling up your character is to look cooler and better anyway, so of course you'd want that to happen with your skills as well.
Yep.
Like a meteor that fills the entire screen.
Obviously, that seems reasonable.
Without a doubt.
All right, so I've got one more question here from Facebook, and then if you guys have any, we'll jump over to you. But this last question here from our Facebook is, do you think botting will influence the economy of Diablo 3? What a big question. Well, I know that you have a lot of thoughts and opinions on this, Kevin, so I'll throw it off to you.
All right, so will botting influence the economy? I'm going to say no. I mean, maybe in a decade it could possibly be somewhere near remotely close, but I'm still going to say no. My reasoning behind this is because the Battle.net 2 protocol has yet to be cracked, and it's already been out for, what, a year?
Yeah,
a little over
it's
a year
almost
now.
a year now, yeah.
So, yeah, so Battle.net 2 has been out for a little over a year now, if you want to count the StarCraft 2 beta as well. I haven't seen any public research on it. I haven't seen anybody posting notes. No, absolutely nothing on it just yet. All the data is encrypted. Essentially, there are still parts of the Battle.net 1 protocol that haven't been investigated or researched, and that's been out for 16 years now, close to 16 years. So yeah, after a decade and a half, the Battle.net 1 protocol is still there are still, shady parts of it that people really aren't sure about. So, I mean, if there are bots, if at all ever, it's going to take quite some time for people to even come close to developing them. After that, I know that Blizzard has integrated like a much better anti-hack system, so Warden has been updated. And aside from that, Blizzard now has a lot better moderation abilities on Battle.net 2 that they did in Battle.net 1, because you have to remember, Battle.net 1 was made in 95, the late 95, so it could be released in early January. I think it was January 1st or something like that of 96 with Diablo 1. So, I mean, we've been using a 15-year-old system, and bots didn't show up on Diablo 2 until, what, 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago? I think even that's stretching it. Probably 3 years ago is when they really, really started coming out, and things got stupid. So, I mean, if anything, what is that? 10 years after the game comes out? 8 years after the game comes out? So, I mean, I guess we could talk about this again in 8 years. But, but I mean, no, I don't think that this will be a problem whatsoever.
Something else, too. I want to say two quick things, too, about this, because this is actually a pretty interesting topic. The first is that Blizzard actually, I know that they're kicking up their efforts for Diablo 3 specifically to prevent hacking and botting issues. They just added a new post to their job listings, looking for anti-hackers with experience as a elite hacker, basically.
Yes. Yeah, we were talking about this earlier, and one of the pluses for this anti-hacker, or this anti-cheater engineer is what it's called. So one of the pluses is having leak hacks.
Lead hacking experience or something like that. Yeah.
I wonder how you prove that to them. Hack it or something.
You hack into everyone's Facebook that works for Blizzard. I don't know. but yeah, no. So they're obviously taking steps to try to prevent this from happening. So that's pretty awesome. I think that's definitely a pretty important aspect. The fact that they're obviously concerned about this being a possibility and they're doing what they can. But I think another big thing too is just the way Blizzard is structuring things now makes it so much more risky to hack and bot, because your account now will be tied to multiple games if you have multiple Blizzard games. And you log into Battle.net and your name is there, so obviously all your personal information. Blizzard clearly has much more access to you as an individual now when you purchase the game, so it makes it riskier because they could just shut down your Blizzard account and maybe cancel off all your games. I don't know if that's possible, but it could be.
It's definitely possible. And now that everything's tied to your Battle.net account, all they have to do is ban your Battle.net account. And one of the big differences between Diablo 2 and Diablo 3 is that Diablo 2 had CD keys. Diablo 3 is going to have authentication keys, which are one use, and then you throw them away. So in Diablo 2, I mean, okay, you have one CD key. If you get banned, the first ban is only temporary. It's a month long, and then it gets unbanned. And then the second ban is obviously permanent. However, there have been a couple of times where they just did like a mass unbanning. I think because, I mean, and this was years ago, that they unbanned a bunch of players because of a mistake in their software. So, boom, as soon as that happened, all the CD keys that were previously banned were no longer banned. Now, you get 2 bans per server. Okay, so with that one CD key, you can log into East, West, Asia, Europe, and then the beta server whenever they have a PTR. So essentially, you have 8 possible chances overall. So you get banned on US East, you can go to US West. You get banned on West, you can go to Asia, and so on and so forth. Now in Diablo 3, you're restricted to one region, and once you get banned, I mean, you're banned. I mean, yeah, they can do temporary bans, but obviously if you're a botter and they catch you for botting, they're just gonna ban you straight up, and then boom, now you have to go out and buy $60, whereas Diablo 2 you can get for $40. And I mean, now it's what, as cheap as $20. So there's CD key lists probably all over the internet with thousands and thousands of CD keys for Diablo 2. I'm sure most of them are muted and banned and whatnot. So it's really no use. It's no use trying to find them and use them now. But I mean, this isn't going to be a problem that we're going to have for Diablo 3. So I mean, if somebody goes out and spends 3, 4, 5 grand on authentication keys just so they can make like 15 accounts, cool. You just wasted 5 grand and your accounts are going to be banned in a week. So
yeah, it's too funny. Yeah, I overall I don't expect it to be as much of a problem. So, all right. So what do you got for questions over there?
I actually have a pretty good question. This is from Todd from the Diablo Fans Facebook, and he's talking about your purgatory is where the root of his questions come from. So he said at about 3 minutes in this week's purgatory, you showed some footage where there was a healing potion or some kind of potion in his inventory that was on his belt, and he wants to know what the significance of the 5 belt spots are going to be if they're just going to be potions. And let's see what else. I guess we can answer that one real quick before we jump in. He's got a couple questions here, and they're all kind of related, so I mean, this is good. As far as the belt spots go, yes, you can have potions in them, but they're all for. You can also have skills and stuff like that. So I mean, things you're going to use. So I mean, I guess I haven't tried this, but I'm assuming you can put scrolls in there too. Anybody else have anything to add?
I didn't even actually. I wasn't even certain as to whether or not there was going to be belt slots, because I know that the potions are on cooldowns now, but we're confirmed that belts still have slots for.
Well, I mean, it's not really belt slots. Okay, and this is kind of where another one of his questions also asks this. I guess I can just clear it up right now. It's not really a belt slot. It's more like the skill bar. But you can put potions in there because I mean essentially you can use them. So I mean you can tie it to your left click or whatever, or your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, and assuming scrolls will work the same way, so you can get a buff or whatever you need. But yes.
Sorry to cut you off real quick, but why would you put a potion on your thing when you could put a skill there? That seems like.
I don't know.
You're cutting yourself off of possibly using a skill. And that's maybe I'm just a dummy.
You don't have 7 skills that you always use or 8 skills you're always using.
The only thing I can think of is you might want to designate one of those spots for potions. Yes, you can't spam them like you can in Diablo 2, but that makes them all that much more important to use them quickly when you do need them. Right. Because I'm assuming you're saving it until you're almost dead. For those life-saving moments.
So hardcore.
And you don't want to have to. You don't want to have to open up your inventory, find it in your inventory, right-click it just to heal when you can just push a button in those moments. So I can see where some people probably will want to use it that way. But I mean, at the same time, 7 skills, 7 slots. That's where I'm.
Yeah, there's 8, isn't there? Because we have 5
tab, right?
1 through 5, right? So we have 1 through 5, left click, right click, and then the swap skill or whatever.
It seems like. If I had to make that choice between quickly being able to hit a potion or having an extra spell consistently, I would always choose the spell. Cutting yourself off, especially with such a limitation as only 8.
But if you're playing hardcore in Diablo 2, there are a lot of builds where people sacrificed strength and damage output for health just because they need to stay alive. So I mean, hardcore, I would maybe stick the potion on the swap, and then if I'm gonna die, swap it real quick, use it, and get away. Because I mean, obviously. If I'm in the end game, I don't want to die. I mean,
I guess you're right. I guess the question is just going to be how easily changeable is this hotbar going to be? I guess like after you use it, you could switch back to a spell until it's off cooldown, and then go back to it.
It's World of Warcraft essentially. You know how you have the little skill slots in World of Warcraft? You can just click and drop them, and you're gonna replace them just as easy. I mean, that's exactly how it is, right? At least that's how it was in the last BlizzCon build.
Yeah. All right, so that makes sense.
So let's see, what else does he have here? Will the potions be instant return or health over time, or will both types drop? Actually, I think that's a good question.
I'm pretty sure there's something just mentioned that the orbs are kind of healing you over time. They drop on the ground, but potions,
are instant. Okay.
almost positive that that's how it's going to work. So
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And yes, potions are going to be stackable, I'm assuming, because, I mean... Oh, right, because they stack in the inventory now. And his next question was, while stacking is nice, does this mean the belt slots are not going to be extra inventory? Well, I mean, it's not really an extra belt. Okay, right, so his next two questions, that, and then whether or not there's going to be, like, 20 belt slots. So essentially, it seems like he's confusing the Diablo 2 belt with the Diablo 3 skill hotbar kind of a thing. I don't even really know what to call it.
Yeah, I mean, basically, there's no more belt slots. That's not. We just
Right.
we have our skill bar, our hot bar, which we can put potions on, like we were just talking about, or scrolls or whatever. But having belts with all these potions, that's not there because for the very reason the potions aren't spammable anymore. So.
Yep, pretty much that, and I mean, now it's kind of like a minimized UI. Now we don't have as much space. I mean, it looks like they cleaned it up. It looks all nice and pretty. So, I mean, it's like a hot bar now, where we can use anything that with a hotkey.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that about does it for this week's DiabloCast. So hopefully we entertained you guys. Sorry for the lateness of it, but we are obviously so happy to have the return of Tyler, Mr. CyberDragon. So hopefully we can, hopefully we find some time in a future podcast to include him as well, because it's always lovely to have him around. So thank you guys so much for listening. For Tyler and for Kevin, this has been Dennis. Thanks again, and we will see you next time.
Take it easy, guys.
See you soon.
I hope you see them soon.
I hope. Told you, if any one of you just want to pay me $35,000 to do whatever you want, then I can.
Eh,
quit
what
my
the
job.
hell? That's chump change.
That seems a reasonable salary for a podcast.
Wow, imagine I wouldn't mind making 35 grand for doing the podcast. I even woke up early today.
that definitely warrants at least $1,000 or so. So
Seriously, I think I did a good job being a good little boy.
everything.
Well, because I worked 12 to 11 the last 2 days in a row, so.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to. It's too much work.
Oh, really? Because I choose those. God, I wish I could spend my entire day at work, because that's where I like to spend.
Hey, maybe if you work at Blizzard, I wouldn't mind. Are you kidding me, dude? Grape jelly is the shiz nipple.
Pretty sure strawberry is the best. So.
That's so gross, man.
Because grape jelly is like so superior to strawberry.
It is, dude.
God, you guys would want to talk about the player collision in PvP, wouldn't you?
Yep.
Yes, we would.
I'm just not sure if they're gonna let us cross swords or not. If it's just gonna be body collision. All right. Okay. Gotta go in 3, 2.